I'm talking to Dr. Allan Freeth, CEO of Telstra, about Ultra Fast Broadband in New Zealand. Now, in the previous part, you actually explained why Telstra didn't participate in the UFB tender process. You didn't want to break up your network. Telecom, on the other hand, decided that it was going to break up its network so that it could participate. Have you subsequently had any second thoughts about that? I mean, would there be a possibility of separating the HFC network in particular?
Oh, well, that's a slightly different thing. Telecom, of course, it wasn't just its network. Telecom was forced, and had been forced prior to this from the first bill, to separate out its retail, wholesale and its network companies. That was a very expensive exercise which we were opposed to and made that statement publicly at the time, mainly because we didn't think the cost benefits worked for the country or clearly for Telecom. For us to participate in the UFB build, we would have to separate the retail business of TelstraClear from the network. And under the circumstances at the time, that made no sense in value terms, nor for the customers at all. The issue facing the builders of the Ultra Fast Broadband network in Wellington and Christchurch, which is quite different to elsewhere, is they have to compete against a network that can match them or beat them, both in terms of speeds already, and has been in existence. And I don't necessarily disillusion myself with customer loyalty, where only if we provide services, customers will stay with us. But I do know I have quite a way to go to provide customers with good prices and services against anything that this UFB network can come to. So your point about would we consider partnerships, would we consider breaking the company up with the HFC network, we've made it very clear to everybody that anything's on the table. But you have to come and talk real to us. You don't turn up and say, well, actually, we don't think that network's worth anything, so we aren't going to pay you for it. And that's a big difference between New Zealand and Australia. You see, Telstra has agreed to participate in their UFB, but as of last count, they've been paid $11 billion by the government for compensation for giving up customers and their network into the NBN. So, they are very clear on shareholder value that if people are interested in parts of our network, they pay fair value for that. And if they don't want to, then they compensate us for it. And clearly there's no compensation on the table in New Zealand. Telecom's never got any compensation. We don't expect to get any. So again, the issue comes down to, are you going to be sensible in a business world or not? So we've said we're happy to cooperate, we're happy to be part of things. But to be honest, until about a month and a half ago, no one had talked to us about the HFC network until I think someone woke up one day and thought, oh, this might be a problem.
But it's always been sitting there. I mean,
yes.
it was a blindingly obvious issue for the UFB rollout in Wellington and Christchurch in particular.
I was waiting, but I waited a year and a half.
And so now people are talking about whether they can use it. There's another question there. Is there a theoretical maximum limit for the HFC network? I mean,
look, I think that the HFC networks are a great network and very robust. And in fact, in both earthquakes in Christchurch, in the second one, it never got broken as such. Where someone's house disappeared, clearly their part of the network disappeared as well. But to be honest, they built it really tough, and it's a really robust network, and it's one that now has 5 years, 6 years life in it, easily. I think no one in the industry, and I wouldn't pretend, would say that in about 2 to 3 years' time, the economics of maintaining that type of network compared to a more modern, so-called modern or fibre, begins to not become material, but begins to show. So, we continue to upgrade and build networks. So our intention with the HFC network, assuming nothing else, would be one day we would have fibred it out. Purely because in 5 years' time we would have, as customer demand had changed, we would have upgraded it to the next aspect of the network. So we weren't going anywhere. So you're right, there will always be, and I don't know the technology about the fibre, but I think that the engineers would say as long as they can it's not so much the fibre, it's the switches on the end of it is actually
Yeah.
the issue. As long as they can get equipment capable of running 100, 150 megabits, 200 megabits a gig, whatever it is, it will run over that network. It comes down to an issue of maintenance and control, which actually is an issue that our friends at North Power, even though, and they are friends of ours, we get on very well, Chorus knows very well, and others don't understand. Your first dollar in any network's your cheapest, because it's really easy to build a network. It's a different story keeping it running and maintaining it and upgrading it. And that's all about the way the switch makers and Cisco and others work and stuff. So our message has been very clear. We're not here to be disruptive. We're not here to be
So are you saying that
winders.
are there discussions with the likes of Crown Fibre Holdings about
There's nothing occurring right now at all. As I say, about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, there was some discussion about the HFC network.
with Crown Fibre?
Yeah, and that went nowhere at that point. I've waited a while for someone to notice that the next two biggest cities we had half the market share of, and we had a good network that would compete. And clearly we intend to keep those customers and intend to provide really good services to customers on it.
Okay. One of the difference between pricing in Australia and New Zealand is quite striking. I mean, in Australia there's 50 gigabyte plans and 200 gigabyte plans, whereas here we seem to have 2 gigabyte plans and, if you're lucky, a 40 gigabyte plan, which is kind of expensive. And in terms of the data caps, and then comparably in speed, we're talking, I mean, maybe double the speed in Australia for the same price, pretty much across the board in terms of the product suite that Telstra offers. Why?
Well, first, there's a disclaimer, so I'm not an economist, so I won't be absolutely sure about this, but I think it's really simple. 22 million people compared to 4 million people. You know, the economics of network investment is all about scale. It's just all about scale and volume. When I first entered this business 6 years ago and I was sent to Telstra for a couple of weeks, the first guy I met, who was an industry veteran of 45 years, said, if you want to be successful, Allan, the only thing you need to remember is scale and volume. That's what you need. I remember some discussions in the very early days around building a mobile network, and we were talking to some gentlemen in the States at the time who we were saying, 4 million people, and they said, oh, that will be fine, we'll be able to build that out, no problems. How big's the city, Allan, in terms of geographical area? And we said, we weren't talking a city, we were talking the country, and it went quiet, and they said, oh, we'll never be able to do it, not at the money you're talking about. I think that's partly the issue. I'm not an economist, I don't know about the other.
The geographic distribution? Well,
no, just you have more customers. The more customers you have, the more money you make, the more you can play with your prices. It's a simple equation.
The obvious answer to that would be if you dropped your prices in Wellington and Christchurch for faster broadband and started seriously competing with both ADSL, more aggressively competing with the ADSL offerings from Telecom wholesale, you might pick up a lot more market share.
Well, I think there's always, that's the whole point of a market. The whole point of a market is at what point can you have price points that reflect a fair return on the investment you've made. And at what point do other players enter and you have to begin competing and prices coming down. That's what a market's about, that's what competition's about. And you're right, we're going to have to change our prices on that. And yes, we have looked at if we lower the price on this much more to tell how many more customers can we get as well. But again,
so you've got
the investment of that, the money that comes off that, of course, pays for investment across the whole network. So it's not as if people are subsidising, it's just that was a premium service, that was a triple play service. And that advantage, I think, as you've probably rightly pointed out, has been negated by competitors, and we either provide more value for the same price or we drop the price. And we've been forced to do that every week,
Right. I mean, in terms of the capacity of the fibre network versus the cable network, there are it's much higher bandwidth sort of on a reliable basis, sort of around the clock on the cable. I think that's what your customers would think, and that's why they choose the cable connections as opposed to ADSL.
Yeah, I mean it's a bigger pipe if you want to, and you want to pay for it, and it's a faster pipe.
And it's a premium product, isn't it?
Yeah, and you aren't dependent whether you're more than 1.5k from the Telecom exchange and all the other stuff that goes with it, and you don't get throttled and you don't have contention rates the same way you'd have on copper. So all those factors come into play around consumer choice on that. Some people like one bill for everything, it just suits them to have that. Others have other needs that they want to.
So looking forward, what are your competitive strengths in Telstra, and where are the best prospects for growth? All things considered evenly. Let's perhaps to consider that both in relation to
I understand the question. It's a big question, though.
Yeah, but let's assume for argument's sake that the UFB goes ahead in the way that it's intended at present. Where would you be? What would you be doing?
Well, it's quite a hard question because we don't have a strategic plan as such. We have 5 strategic plans, and they all depend on what happens and a number of combinations of that. And so it's a very hard market to plan in. We've always felt that the advantages we've brought to the market has always been, however you term innovation, we've always provided different types of product types. We've provided TV, we've provided choice, and we've certainly tried to provide those at the right price and as best the customer service we can provide as well, and clearly measuring that against the market as well as customer expectations. We're very determined to be part of the New Zealand scene, particularly in the large enterprise space and the consumer space and the wholesale space. But I have to be fair, that's contingent on there being a market that we can compete in. And I don't mean that as a threat that we'd ever leave like tomorrow or whatever, or not compete here. But I think the issue is there are consequences from this, and this bill has negated many of the advantages that most telcos have in the market, because the advantages came in being vertically integrated. By owning the network that you run and having a retail offering that you control on top of that, it gives you a lot of levers to be able to compete on different ways. Being just a provider to a network that you don't own and you have no control over in terms of its investment path, in terms of what can be offered on it, really limits both what you can do and the type of money you can make off that. So, I mean, we're really confident in ourselves. Give us a good market, give us the right regulation. Actually, give us bad regulation, because we had it for 15 years, we can still be successful. And we will continue to be successful. But I'm not sure New Zealand consumers are going to have the choices they once had. I'm not sure they're going to see the innovation. In fact, I'm convinced they're not going to see the innovation they had. And I think that's a bit sad, really.